let's hear from the different private, public, people sectors representative as to what giving looks like in your everyday.
DBS has purpose in our DNA. That was how we started in the first place 50-odd years ago as the Development Bank of Singapore. So the way we look at it is first and foremost to galvanize the expertise that we have, the resources that we have, and of course the people as well, and then the clients, the customers.
From the private sector alone, it's an interesting question, right? When you say private sector, we tend to think about the corporates, obviously. And over time, I think, especially in recent times, it's changed a little bit, right? Because corporates don't just act through the corporate vehicles. They sometimes set up their corporate foundations, and through that, they do sort of, their own giving. But in addition to that, I think, especially in Singapore in recent times, you'll see a lot more of, what you call the single family offices being set up. And I think that is becoming more and more an important part of the so-called private sector, right? Because they bring a fair amount of purpose and sophistication to the giving game.
From the perspective of MCCY, where I am, I think philanthropy to us is a very broad definition of a simple act to improve the well-being of others. And I would say for us, it goes beyond just policies. It is also about creating that powerful community, like what we're doing here, and building capability in this community so that we can truly become a city of good.
So having had the fortune of having the confluence of my voluntary and professional roles merge and heading up charity myself, I certainly see an appetite of diversifying interest in the concept of giving, as you had mentioned earlier, Sir Koon. And for any charities, I don't think I only speak for mine or the ones I represent. A lot of times charities are very appreciative of the treasure as much as they are of the time and the talent, right? So how is it that we are able to merge these expectations of the people we would like to help and help them in a way that does not make it difficult to help themselves?
Over the last number of years, maybe at the turn of the decade, there have been more and more challenges that we see in the society and the community, right? Apart from climate, it's about social inequality. As we emerge from the pandemic, how the whole recovery is not really balanced, right? And therefore, what's really important is the whole collective effort. And so this whole topic about PPP, I think is really apt and critical. Because each and every one of us, I do believe, has the resources, and many of us clearly have the heart. But what I've observed as well, and also through talking to colleagues and also many of our customers, is that they sometimes struggle with knowing where to go to and how to go about it. It's not that they don't want to do it, it's not that they do not have the resources, but where to go to and how to go about it. And so therefore, I think the ability to really get ourselves a lot more structured and organized is really, really important.
I see the people sector really as a powerhouse of great ideas, passion, and good ground initiatives. I think the role of the public sector is advocacy, right? To amplify and to help to advocate for some of these causes that are ground up. I see the private sector really as a strategic investor almost, right? With the resourcing both treasure but also talent and time. The second role that I hope the public sector can do more and do better is bring people together, right? To match make that. And third is C, which is capability building. I hope that we would have more opportunities to bring people together across the 3 Ps and say, how can we organize ourselves better?
What works is actually for people to learn by trialing. Because in certain cases, the intervention that you try may not work as planned. But with this type of model, people learn together. And you don't take the risk of rolling out a full-scale sort of national program without knowing whether or not it's going to work. So it's a small pilot program where everybody sort of plays to their strengths, including the private sector putting their money at risk and small amounts to trial things.
I think on that note, a lot of times outcomes are driven by funders' priorities, right? How or what would you advise a charity, for example, who feel pressured to comply to these goals versus the goals that they have identified, which was ground up? How do charities be brave in the partnership?
Whenever any charity sets out to deliver any kind of intervention, of course it comes from a good place, of course it's based on intuitively what the community needs. But at the same time, more and more people are saying, look, we want results. We want to see what, what real benefit you bring to the table. There is a need to sort of up the game in terms of, measuring the impact. But I think that question of what the impact is, what is the real impact, is something that the different parties within that collaboration need to come together and discuss, right? Because what you want to achieve is actually not just, outcomes that you can see immediately on day one, but long-term impact.
There might always be certain donors that have a very strong passion in a particular area. And I don't think there's anything wrong in and of itself. And if that were the case, this is again where I've mentioned earlier on, the ability, therefore, to galvanize the resource and do some matching is helpful. But in my own personal experience and observation, having done this also with many of my high net worth customers, actually there are still sufficient, or I would say enough of them who are pretty broad-based. They've got resources, they're looking at ways by which they can make a contribution. And I think what they really care about is whether the real impact is being made.
One attendee has asked, you spoke about the value of us as human beings and not just human doings, as Tony said earlier, is network and net worth. What further advice can any of the sectors give SMEs who have much lesser resources but want to be as others-centered as this summit is encouraging us all to be, in terms of lower costing options to participate in philanthropy, so accessible philanthropy?
I would say that you can start small and specific and targeted, perhaps in the locality that you operate. And for example, the national level, we do have volunteer centers as well. So that might be a good place to start in terms of there being a ready platform. And you could sort of encourage your employees to contribute via the volunteer centers, for example.
As an example, one of the members that we have in YBLN, he has like 60 employees, and his thing is about inclusive employment, right? He ensures that there's a certain percentage of people that he employs who are differently able. And that's his thing. And that could be good enough. That's a great example, I think, for many people to follow.
For me, I agree with what's been said, right? You can start small. It is not about the giving of the millions and millions, right? I mean, those who can, and there are people who do it great. But more importantly, I do think that even that little effort, whatever we can spare, whatever we can give, even from, the monthly deduction from our salaries, which, for example, many of my colleagues, most of them participate in, just these little bits all add up, right? Whether it's to the community chairs or to others. So I do think that people with a heart to give should never shy away from the fact that we do not make a difference. Each and every one of us makes a difference.
I would like to hear from our panelists in the next couple of minutes, if you can share your one hope for Singapore to become a more caring, inclusive, and compassionate society for good.
We need to ensure that no one is left behind. There's a lot to be done. But I would say to this room, this audience, how to be a leader in a city of good, I would say is really important, right? And in this sense, you can be a leader, not just within your organization, your company. You can also be a leader to your community of friends, your group of friends, your family. And everything that you do in contributing to a city of good, whether it's personal volunteering, whether it's donating that little bit of money, I think every little step as a leader helps.
Well, my wish is that Singapore is going to be truly a city of good, where everyone is a giver, everyone is also a receiver of the joy of giving, and everyone cares for everyone else.
For me, it's really back to this word, purpose again. Singapore has become really a very successful, cosmopolitan, wealthy city. So the one fear I have is that we become completely disjointed. We forget our roots. We forget who we really are. We forget that we are ultimately made up of a community of human beings. So my one wish is that each and every one of us as individuals, each and every one of us as an institution, and I guess each and every one of us as a leader, whatever we may be, really do not lose this sense of purpose, and building back on what I've just said earlier on, impact real people.
We understand that about 12% of a charity's funds come from the corporate sector. A much larger percentage, maybe about 3 to 4 times, come from grants from the public sector. Now, the next time we meet, let's ensure we shift that needle a little bit further, because it shows that many more businesses are doing good and are committing to being good.